books out and go to page, first of all, honor students, if you look at page 5, there's some good tips for a book review. I realize that many of you already written a book review for a history class last semester, but these are like you get stuck writing, trying to figure out what to write about. Okay, page 5 is pretty good. Okay. Skip ahead, everybody, to page 14. There is some information in there on, what plagiarism looks like and that sort of thing, if you don't understand what plagiarism is. Obviously, book reviews will be turned in on turnedin.com, so if you turn something in and it shows you a high rate, obviously you want to look at that before you submit it and make sure that you're not plagiarizing. Okay, so, all right, so if you look at page 14, you can see kind of an outline of what we're going to do this first section. Okay, foundational documents through the Declaration of Independence. So, guys, we're really kind of going back in history here to look at how we get to 1776 and what went into the thinking of Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence in 1776. What went into that? There's a lot of history before that, world history before that, in different forms of government that were studied by the founders of this country to try and figure out what would be the best type of government for human beings, okay, for free human beings. And so that's the big focus here as we get into this. There's an outline here. We're going to look at what is state, what is a state, what is government, what is a nation, what's the difference between a nation and a state? Is there a difference? We're going to look at 4 origins of the state or theories of origins of the state. We might get into that a little bit today. We're going to look at the social contract theory, which is really, guys, this is what we use. Okay, it's a social contract. It's an agreement between people and government. Does that make sense? It's a contract between us and our government. That's our social contract. Okay, so we'll dig into that. We'll look at different forms of government. Some of these you've probably heard of before. Okay, and then get into the weeds here a little bit and look at economic theories as forms of government. Hey, lock it in. Pay attention. You got to pay attention, gentlemen. You got to look at me. You got to pay attention. Okay. You've got, then once we get to focus on democracy, 5 basic concepts of democracy, number 6 there, stop. That's where the objective portion of your test ends. Okay. And once we get to number 7 on this outline, that's where your essay begins for the first test. Okay, so we're going to have an objective portion of the test and then an essay portion of the test. Okay, all right. Now, with that essay, we're going to look at influences on our government, which include a lot of it is British or English, the Magna Carta, the Petition of Right, and the English Bill of Rights. And then, first colony, 1607, Jamestown. Second colony, Plymouth Rock in Massachusetts, Jamestown's in Virginia. Those are your first 2 colonies. Okay, and how they grow eventually into 13. What did the governments of those colonies look like? And how did that impact when we formed a whole new government when we declared independence? So we're going to look at that, which is pretty interesting. Then we're going to look at the American Revolution and how that started and what caused that, what led us to break away from the British. Okay, and then we're going to look at some important speeches and other documents that are going to influence the Declaration of Independence. Okay, and so your essay is basically going to have 3 topics. Going to have the English tradition, Magna Carta, these types of things on our government, colonial era and revolutionary era on our government, and lastly, the Founding Fathers and important speeches and documents. That would be the 3rd body paragraph of your essay. If you go online right now on Canvas and you pull up section 1, The review sheet for the first test is on there right now. Okay, you can look at the essay question. Okay, we're still a ways away from that. We got a lot to do before we get there. Okay, so don't panic on that, but try and lock in every day and pay attention to kind of what we're talking about. Get a good feel for it. If you have questions, ask questions. Okay, if you need me to repeat something, Mr. Yard, will you repeat that while you're taking notes? Okay. So if you look at the quote on the page 14 there, at the top of page 14, from Winston Churchill, and we all know who that is, right? Gosh, remember who that was? Yeah. Okay. He says this about democracy, which is a classic quote. He says, democracy is the worst form of government on earth, except for all the rest. Democracy is messy. Our system is messy. It's frustrating. When you pay attention to politics, okay, right now Congress is trying to decide whether they're going to fund Ukraine, they're going to fund Israel, they're going to fix the border. So you got one party saying, listen, man, number now is 10 million people have come across since you've been the president, and you're not doing anything about it. And then the president's saying, I need money for Ukraine to prevent World War III from taking place. Republicans are saying, well, we're not giving you money for Ukraine unless you fix the border. And it's frustrating. It's messy. It's time consuming. It's inefficient. And that's the way they designed it. They designed it this way. Okay? Let's find out why. Okay? Because a lot of people I don't want to pay attention to politics because it just makes me mad. Of course it does. It was designed that way. Guys, if it was easy to pass laws, do you think we'd have a whole bunch of more laws if it was easy to pass laws? Laws are often restrictions on your what? On your freedom. So do you want to make it easy to pass laws? Or you want to make it hard to pass laws? You see what I'm saying? So they designed it that way purposely. Good? All right, let's jump in with the notes, okay? Easy way to do this is kind of a Roman numeral number 1, okay? And I'm going to give you a definition of government. This is where you start writing. So, section 1, government. Definition. Are you ready? Government. An institution through which society makes and enforces, an institution through which society makes and enforces its public policy. An institution through which society makes and enforces public policy. Okay? Have I talked about this with you before, public policy? When I use the term public, what am I generally referring to? Government. So public policy, all things government does. Public policy. Everything government does is public government policy. Write that down. Does that make sense? So the most common public policy, guys, is what?
Are you looking for a certain law?
Any law is a public policy, right? So that's like the most easiest thing. It could be a regulation, could could be a public policy. Okay. It could be a holiday. So Martin Luther King Day off. Okay, it's a federal holiday. That was a public policy that was created. Okay, everybody follow that? Okay, so all things government does, public policy. All right, now let's look at, let's define the term state. Okay, what is a state? Now this is confusing in the United States, because the United States is a nation state made up of 50 states, yes? So it could be a little bit confusing. But an easy way to define a state is a politically organized unit. State is a politically organized unit. I don't know if anybody's ever heard somebody say, refer to Israel as the state of Israel. Okay. We have 50 politically organized units in the United States, and then the United States itself is a politically organized unit over those 50 states. Yes? Okay. So, yeah. The state is a politically organized unit. So a state could be the same thing as a country, or may not be the same thing as a country. Follow me. Especially here. Okay? Now, Mexico. Do you guys know how many states Mexico has? I think it's 33. Let's ask Siri. How many states are there in Mexico? 31. Sorry. 31 free and sovereign states. Okay? Do you guys, any of you guys know what state you were from in Mexico? Or your family was from? What was it called? Okay. Where was that? What part of the country? Central? Near Mexico City? No? Okay. Mountains? No? Okay. All right, so got a basic definition of a state. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at 4 characteristics of a state. How many characteristics of a state? 4 characteristics of a state. Write that down. 4 characteristics of a state. Now, on a test, guys, a question like this, when I say, okay, we're going to study 4 characteristics, you could see 2 types of questions. Like you could see a listing question where list the 4 characteristics of state, or you could see a 2-point short answer question which says name 2 of the 4 characteristics of the state. Something like that. So usually when I repeat myself, how many characteristics? That's something you're gonna like need on a test. Okay. So there's 4. So let's start with number 1. Okay. You got to have people. Population is the first characteristic of the state. Guys, we are going very basic. These are building blocks into where we're going. Okay. So you don't need to know this for a test, but which nation on the planet has the largest population? China has been surpassed by India. Yeah. China kind of this whole one-child thing. And then a lot of the girls that they had back in the 70s and stuff, they would kill them. Because you were only allowed to have one, and people wanted to have a boy. If you had a girl, you put her up for adoption, or you just abandoned her, put her somewhere where people would find her. That's what happened to my daughter. She was abandoned in front of a government building. They knew that she would be found there and she would be taken care of. The state took care of her, put her in an orphanage, and then China allowed people to adopt from the West, and so we adopted from China. Okay, most of these are rural people. Okay, so if you adopt internationally from China, chances of getting a healthy child is really good. If you adopt from Russia, the chances of getting a healthy child is not as good because of the alcohol problems that they have in Russia. Okay, that's serious. Like, I know people that have adopted from Russia and the kids have problems. If you come from a rural farming family, chances are that baby's going to be healthy in China. Okay, and that's what happened. You know, obviously Lily's healthy. So, like, yeah.
This like the consecutive year that kind of has like record lows.
Yeah. Yeah, and their economy's struggling, and they don't have enough women. Okay. Now, back in the day, if Genghis Khan's clan didn't have enough women, they'd go get some. Well, invade Taiwan. Go get some more women.
Okay.
No, I'm serious. Like, I'm serious. Like, this is a problem that China had. Okay, we all have our own problems. Okay, theirs are mine a little different than ours. Okay, but no, that's a real issue in China. They do not have enough women. Okay, all right. So India number 1, China number 2, number 3. United States. Okay, last census said about 330 million. India's at 1.3 billion, maybe 1.4 now. China is 1.2, 1.3. Okay. So we're the third largest. Okay. All right. The smallest population country in the world? Vatican City. Last count, 826. Okay. All right. The second characteristic of a state is you got to have territory. Territory. You got to have land. Okay. So, smallest territory, smallest country in the world, Vatican City. Largest, Russia. Okay. All right, here's the third one. Sovereignty. Let me spell that for you. Sovereignty. SOVEREIGNTY. Sovereignty.
I wasn't holding my pen.
SOVEREIGNTY. Yep. Let me define it for you. Put your pen back in your hand. Supreme and absolute power within its own territory. Supreme and absolute power within its own territory. Question?
Oh, okay, second one? No, that's cool.
Let's take a sip. Bless you. Supreme and absolute power within its own territory. Now, sovereignty is a word that can be used in a lot of different contexts. Okay, so when you turn 16,
Good morning, faculty and staff. We will do faculty prayer in the conference at
you gain some sovereignty for yourself. For instance, at the age of 16, after the age of 16, you can get up, walk out this door, walk out the school door, and never come back. You can drop out of high school at 16. At 15, you're truant. We're going to put you in school. 16, you're out. You can go. Okay? When you turn 18, you get a little more sovereignty. Used to be able to buy cigarettes, but now you can only buy a shotgun and gamble in Oklahoma.
You buy a rifle?
Maybe, I think. I don't know. I know you can buy a shotgun at 18.
You can buy
Anything but a handgun.
But
Yeah.
the weird thing, If you're 18, someone can give you a handgun and you can open carry it on your hip.
Yeah. You just get mine.
You just
Okay.
can't buy it, which is weird.
When you turn 21, you get even more sovereignty. Okay? Now, sovereignty here means that the characteristics of the state is able to control what goes on within it. Okay? And the last characteristic of the state is government. Without a government, it's just a free range. It's an open place. Okay? What is government? An institution through which society makes and enforces public policy, which we defined at the beginning. Okay? So, those are the four characteristics of the state. Now, when we go back in history, study history, and we look at the origins of the state, how do states originate? Where do they come from? How did they develop, organize over time? And I have four, okay? I have four origins of the state. How many? Origins of the state. Four. Origins, you writing that down? Four origins of the state. We're going to talk about it, okay? Today's Thursday. We're going to have a little homework tonight. Okay? You have to do some reading.
I'm going to stay.
And we're going to discuss it tomorrow. Okay? You guys are going to be graded on your participation. Eric, you working tonight? Got time to read? I'm going to have you read. Okay. All right, number one. Origin of the state. Force theory. The force, like the force is with you. Force theory. What does that mean? Well, it means one person or group force people in an area to submit to their power. One person or group force people in an area to submit to their power. They force them. One person or group force people in an area to submit to their power. Okay, I mentioned a name a few minutes ago. Genghis Khan. Okay. You can look at this throughout history. The Vikings. Now, mostly what the Vikings did was they would go in, they would rape, they would pillage, and they would leave. But eventually, certain Vikings got tired of traveling all over Europe and doing this, and they said, why don't we become farmers and do what these people are doing, and they'll live under our control. So that's what some of the Vikings did. They settled, and they forced the people that they conquered to live under their power. Does that make sense? So a lot of different countries throughout history were formed that way. Okay? But you got to go back pretty far for some of that. Does that make sense? Okay? The second origin of the state, where states come from, is the evolutionary theory. Evolutionary theory, Brian. Evolutionary theory. Let me spell it. E-V-O-L-U-T-I-O-N-A-R-Y.
I spell theory. I'm just kidding.
I'll help you if you need it. I have seen the spelling of this senior class.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, you might actually want to go over it.
Theory. T-H-E-O-R-Y. Yeah. Now, well, you guys know what evolution is, right? It evolves, right? Things evolve. Okay, so it starts with a family. Starts with a family, grows into a clan. That clan grows into a tribe. So family, clan, tribe. Now, when we use that word tribe, what does it make us think of?
Indians.
Native Americans. It kind of gives you this image of people that are nomadic, that move around. Tribes moving around. And then they settle. Okay, and form a state. So no longer nomadic becomes agrarian. You're not just going hunting and gathering, you're settling and you form a nation state. Okay. So some states have evolved that way over time. Okay. That's pretty easy. Okay. And so between the force and the evolutionary theory, this is how most countries actually got their start. And obviously, our country's a lot younger than most countries in the world. So some of those countries are ancient, okay, and have changed greatly over time. I mean, think about modern day Turkey, okay, and how much that's changed over time, okay? But the same families were there the whole time, okay? The generations and generations and generations. At some point, people settled there and evolved into a state, okay? The third origin of state, and you may have heard of this, this is the divine right theory. D-I-V-I-N-E, divine, right, R-I-G-H-T, theory. Divine right theory. Now, you're familiar with this, I know you are, but to define it would be God gave people the divine right to rule. Gave certain people the divine right to rule over others and a state. Or in many cases with divine right, we wouldn't call it a state, we would call it a kingdom. You get it? A kingdom. Because that divine right leader is often a king or a queen. And we went through this in Europe, didn't we? Europe went through this. Okay? Saudi Arabia still has a king. Okay? Britain still has a king. They just don't have any power. With me? So, a lot of wars were fought over these. Okay? Now, this is your bloodline. Okay, so when you talk about, Elizabeth I, Elizabeth II, Charles I, second, third, James, go to France, talk about Louis, all the other kings in France, in Denmark, Belgium, all these kings and queens. Okay, all told their people that God gave them the right to rule over them. Are they just making that crap up? That God gave them the power to rule, these kings? Did Queen Elizabeth I, was she given this power from God? I think she was making that up. But the church, which was controlled by the king or the queen, told the people this is what's going on. And people lived under this divine right rule for centuries. Well, I'm a skeptic. I don't think God gave them the right to rule. Now, you guys have studied the Bible a little bit. Are there any examples of where God actually gave somebody, a person, the right to rule over a kingdom? You can find a couple of examples in the Bible. Got a name? Yeah, David. Okay, another? Solomon. Okay, well, that's an actual divine right. Like people ask for a king, and God said, "Here's a king." That's pretty interesting. Almost all this other crap the Europeans doing is just made up. And you know what? Hey, over here. You know what? People got tired of that. They got tired of these kings claiming that God gave them power. And they said, you know what? There's got to be a better way. And that brings us to our fourth and final origin of the state, which, as mentioned earlier, is the social contract theory. Now, this one, guys, we're going to do a deep dive on because this is what we use. Okay, but how did this come about? How did these ideas that this king isn't divine, this queen isn't divine, and we have the right to rule over ourselves? Okay, now, if you've studied the Greeks and you studied the Romans, you know they toyed with this. The word democracy comes from the Greek. Okay, so they toyed with this, and then, you know, the Romans had this thing called the Senate, but they still had a Caesar. But the Senate advised the Caesar, okay, which the Caesar was very powerful. And then the British went through this, and the Europeans went through this. They challenged this, okay? Now, the fact that our nation was spawned by the British, we got to look at some of their theories here, okay? So in your book, if you turn the page to page 15, you'll see Thomas Hobbes, 16, John Locke. Now, John Locke writes this thing called the Second Treatise of Civil Government on page 17 and 18. Look at that. Now, guys, this was written, Locke wrote this in 1680. It's written in English in 1680. You guys have all had to read Shakespeare before. Doing it right now. Little Hamlet, Macbeth. I remember that my senior year of high school. Macbeth. Okay.
Found out yesterday, Macbeth is a guy. I thought the entire time Macbeth was a girl. Well, if I...
Isn't there a Lady Macbeth?
Yeah. Oh, there is. I haven't read the book.
Okay. So, optional assignment. Read the Second Treatise of Civil Government and answer those 5 questions. Okay? Now, if you turn to page 19, you get this guy named Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Okay? Now, required, yes. I'll put it on Canvas and you'll submit it electronically. Okay? Listen, Rousseau, who is Swiss, okay, but also lived in Germany, okay? So these 3 guys have different views of a social contract, what a social contract should look like. Now, guys, Carter, when you're trying to figure out an agreement, because social contract is agreement between the people and the government. When you're trying to figure that out, you got to look at human nature. Okay? Human beings are flawed characters. Yes? Do you trust human beings? Do you not trust human beings? Do you trust them somewhat? That's going to depend on the social contract you have. If you completely trust human beings to do the right thing all the time, your social contract's going to read like 3 sentences long. Okay, we have a government. People are free to do what they please. because you trust them to do all the right things all the time. But we don't do that. And everybody knows that. So which form of government, what kind of social contract is going to work best? That's what you're reading tonight. You're going to look at these three different theories. Does this make sense? Okay? Some of them have a very pessimistic view of man. Some have more optimistic view of man. And these are going to affect our government that we live under to this day. Okay? Our founding fathers read these theories. They understood these theories. So we're going to understand these theories. So what's required tonight is reading those 3 pages that have the names on. Okay? The second treatise on civil government is optional. Okay? Now when you come in tomorrow, this is what I need. I'm going to ask you about Thomas Hobbes. And I need you guys to have something to talk about. What did you think about Thomas Hobbes' theory on social contract? Okay, so you guys know what annotated notes are? Okay, you know what highlighting is? Okay, things that stick out, yes.
What is the optional?
Tomorrow at midnight. You should do it tonight. Yeah. This book is yours. You can write in it. You're keeping it. You're not turning it back in.
So page 15, page 16 to read.
And 19. Rousseau. Okay? This is one of 4 times, guys. This semester, I'm going to ask you to read something. How many times? Do it, please. 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 I want to have a good discussion tomorrow. Okay? The better the discussion in 0 hour tomorrow, the more participation points you get. This discussion stinks. You guys are going to get 2 out of 2. And that 2 out of 2 is not going to help you very much on the first test. But if we have a good discussion, we get a 10 out of 10. Boom. You guys already got 10 for listening to the political spectrum stuff. You're up to 20 out of 20 in this class. So bring something to the table tomorrow.
We have like a really good discussion. Can we get like 15 out of 15?
Man, if you blow me away and come up with some original ideas that I haven't thought of before, absolutely.
20 out of 20.
Okay?
What's the deal?
Everybody with me? Okay. So did I define social contract theory for you? I mean, that's the last thing in the notes for today. Okay. I will put all this on Canvas here in a minute. Okay. But to define social contract theory is just basically government is an agreement between people and government. Yeah.
What's the deal with Ford?
Ford? Motor company?
No, Ford.
Oh, why I always have 4?
Every number.
I won't always have 4. On Monday, we'll only have 3 forms of government. When it comes to geographic distribution of power, I only have 3. That'll be on Monday. Tomorrow's discussion on Friday. Okay? Good? All right. We will see you guys back here tomorrow. An agreement between government, people, and the government. Social contract. You too, guys.